Just like Spectrum, baby. You gotta get Spectrum.
Get award-winning internet for your business. Up to 4 months free when bundled. Visit spectrum.com/business to learn more.
Whether it's our stories, the warmth of our laugh, or our family's secret sauce, we all bring something different to the table. So make some space. The power of connection is waiting right outside your comfort zone. Learn how you can help strengthen your community at belongingbeginswithus.org/teamup.
Spectrum News Plus. Local stories, connecting communities. Streaming now on the Spectrum News app and free with your Spectrum subscription.
I'm Sharon Tazwell. Here's your Spectrum News in 90. President Trump hosting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House Friday. The two leaders discussed new capabilities that would allow Kyiv to strike deeper into Russian territory. Zelensky telling President Trump he hopes a ceasefire in the Middle East could help with the push for peace between Ukraine and Russia.
Again, my congratulations with your successful ceasefire in the Middle East. And I think this is the momentum to finish Russia's war against Ukraine.
Palestinians and aid workers are eagerly awaiting the reopening of the Rafah border crossing to deliver supplies to the Gaza Strip. Hamas reaffirmed Friday its commitment to the ceasefire despite a delay in the return of deceased hostages. U.S. officials say the retrieval is hampered by the scope of the devastation in Gaza. The United Nations says the Middle East is at a critical stage.
All hands on deck are needed to ensure this momentum carries through to a lasting peace.
Prince Andrew will relinquish the use of his royal titles amid a string of scandals. Andrew announced the decision Friday following a discussion with his brother, King Charles. He has faced mounting pressure over his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and links to an alleged Chinese spy. Andrew has repeatedly denied accusations against him. And that is your Spectrum News in 90.
Welcome to The Big Deal. I'm Errol Lewis, national political anchor at Spectrum News. This program focuses on the future of our country and its people. This week, the big deal is the legal setbacks in President Trump's deployment of the U.S. National Guard to American cities. On Thursday, a federal appeals court extended an order blocking federal troops from being deployed in the Chicago area. The court ruled that the administration lacked evidence proving that an organized rebellion exists in that city that would justify the deployment, with the court writing that, quote, political opposition is not rebellion. Undaunted, President Trump says that San Francisco will be the next city where he is considering sending troops.
I'm going to be strongly recommending, at the request of government officials, which is always nice, that you start looking at San Francisco. I think we can make San Francisco. There's one of our great cities 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and now it's a mess. And we have great support in San Francisco, so I'd like to recommend that for inclusion, maybe in your next group. You'll get great support.
Joining me now are two top political analysts. Alex Cohen is a political anchor for Spectrum News Plus, based in Southern California. James Barragon is a political anchor for Spectrum News 1 in Austin, Texas. Alex, let me start with you. As we heard, President Trump says that San Francisco is next on his list for deploying federal troops to Democratic cities. What is crime like in that city, and which local officials is the president referring to that might have requested the presence of the National Guard?
Well, Errol, crime is by many accounts down in the city of San Francisco. Some of the numbers I've seen floated: homicides down 70%, car break-ins down 22%. And San Francisco has been able to achieve this under very difficult circumstances, budget deficits that have made it more tricky to hire and retain law enforcement. So as for this remark that the president made about local government officials, officials. I will tell you that most of the local government officials in Northern California have said the exact opposite. They do not want the National Guard here. There is one key person, not an official, but rather Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff, who's had a very cozy relationship with this administration, who initially did call for the presence of the troops, but as of Friday afternoon, he walked those remarks back, saying that he regretted making that comment and now no longer believes that their presence there would be helpful, Errol.
Oh, very interesting. Now, James, National Guard troops are usually under the control of the various state governors. In Texas, Governor Greg Abbott is deploying your state's National Guard to Austin ahead of the No Kings rally that's planned for the weekend. There's over 2,500 of those protests, which are against the Trump administration's policies. They're taking place all around the country. Is it normal for the Texas governor to send these National Guard troops to peaceful protests? And is it expected to get a little messy over the weekend?
Yeah, I would say it's not regular. It's not a regular occurrence, but we have seen this earlier this year. There was an earlier No Kings protest that had several participating cities in Texas, like San Antonio and Austin. In that instance, Governor Abbott did deploy the National Guard, sort of trying to head off any potential skirmishes. But what we saw in June was that those protests were largely peaceful. But we do know that, like most things these days, there is a lot of politics at play. Governor Abbott has said that these protests are linked to Antifa, and he says that he wants to have the National Guard out there to make sure that there aren't any of these skirmishes. But I'll repeat again, the last time we saw these No Kings protests in Austin, in San Antonio, they were largely peaceful, and the mayors of those cities said the troops were largely not needed.
Okay, the other big headline, Alex, this week was that the president's former national security advisor, John Bolton, has been charged and is being prosecuted by the Department of Justice for his handling of classified documents. He is the latest of the president's political enemies to be targeted and indicted on the orders of the president, along with the former FBI Director James Comey and the New York State Attorney General Letitia James. What's going on inside the Justice Department as a result of all of this?
A lot of internal turmoil and conflict by all accounts, Errol. You know, if you are someone who has strong political leanings, then chances are the Department of Justice is not a place for you to have a career. These are usually men and women who are firmly committed to the pursuit of justice, regardless of which party is in power at the time. And we've heard multiple reports that attorneys within this department are deeply uncomfortable with the fact that there are certain cases that perhaps the president would like to bring up where there just isn't the proper amount of evidence. And therefore, attorneys have been very reluctant to bring up charges. So at the same time, you've got top officials at the White House insisting that these charges be brought. So it's created a lot of tension within this department.
Okay. And now, James, we are still in the middle of a federal government shutdown. It seems that President Trump has little urgency when it comes to negotiating with Democratic leaders. And it's important to remember that the shutdown affects lots of places, not just the nation's capital. What are the local impacts of all of this that you're seeing across Texas?
Well, I would say that so far, the major impact is the concern that it has on federal employees. They know that they are not going to be receiving any more checks after their last previous check came in. But what we will start seeing soon is some of these programs that depend on federal funds start actually running out of funds. We heard from the USDA that the SNAP program here in Texas will not be able to fund the $640 million that it usually gives out. Here in Texas, we have about 3.5 million people that depend on those benefits. Half of those people are children. That will not happen until the end of October, so we've got some time. But as you mentioned, Errol, the president is in no hurry to get this shutdown finished and open the government. Democrats are not, Republicans are not. In fact, the Congress people that we spoke to this week said this thing could drag on pretty long. We know the last one dragged on 35 days. And so these are the real consequences that can happen, where people who depend on these SNAP benefits may not be able to get them if this drags on through the end of October and into November. Is
the state, James, making any kind of contingencies? Because we're talking about people going without food if this should happen?
Yeah, I think that's one of the big questions. The USDA has referred people who depend on these benefits to the state agency that handles them. Now, I think there are questions about what does the state do. That will need some more reporting, but those are the dire consequences. People who depend on this to not go hungry may be in a difficult situation.
Okay, thank you very much, James. Thank you, Alex. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we will talk about the legality of the Trump administration's military strikes in the Caribbean. That's coming up next on The Big Deal.
At Spectrum Noticias, we recognize that our community is vibrant and diverse.
Spectrum Noticias delivers balanced coverage of the stories that matter in our communities and across the country.
Our journalists are based in the neighborhoods we cover, ensuring you get in-depth reporting on what's happening in the places we call home.
So join us at Spectrum Noticias. We're always on, always there for you.
Now available on your TV. Check your local listings. Also available on the Spectrum News app.
Spectrum TV, isn't that only live TV?
No, it's only all my favorite streaming apps with live TV.
Okay.
It's only all included at no extra cost, and that's the magic of math. Will this be on the test? Sure, why not?
It's only one simple payment for all our TV. We gotta simplify and win. Winning is equally important.
If not, more so.
Yeah!
Only Spectrum TV, fixed TV.
Being a cowboy, well, I don't know anything different. I had a very successful career. Life was fast. I was preparing physically. I wasn't doing anything mentally. And then I got hurt. I dug into mental health. I wanted to be better as a person. I start my day with a workout. I live life 8 seconds at a time. Find a place to stop and just breathe. Love your mind.
I'm Sandra, this is Jorge, and we were adopted in 2019. I remember when they first came to us, Michael was already a teenager. The whole cliche of they're so lucky to have you guys, and it's the other way around. They have changed our family for the better. They chose to love us. They didn't have to. They chose us. Family.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org.
We have a lot of drugs coming in from Venezuela, and a lot of the Venezuelan drugs come in through the sea, so you get to see that. But we're going to stop them by land also.
We are back with The Big Deal. This week, the United States carried out 2 more strikes on boats suspected of carrying drugs across international waters. Here is surveillance video of one boat being struck by a missile and exploding. That happened off the coast of Venezuela. 6 people were killed in that strike. From the very beginning, questions have been raised over whether these attacks are legal. The latest strike comes days before the Trump administration authorized the CIA to conduct covert operations inside Venezuela as the U.S. continues to dial up the pressure campaign against that nation's authoritarian leader, Nicolas Maduro. Joining me now to break it all down is Spectrum News national political reporter Taylor Popolars, joining us from the White House. And Taylor, let's start with that boat strike. In order to conduct them, the Trump administration has been declaring that the United States is in a non-international armed conflict with terrorist organizations operating out of Venezuela. Is that actually true? And do these attacks violate U.S. or international law?
So, Errol, we called up some experts to try to get some clarity on this because the Trump administration insists that it is true, and that's why they made this declaration, and that's why the president feels he has the legal authority to carry out these strikes, which are continuing. They don't seem to be slowing down in any way. One of the Georgetown University professors we spoke with, who's an expert in both international law and national security law here in the U.S., summed it up like this for us.
under international law, even if the boats were engaging in drug trafficking, you couldn't arrest them on the high seas. We don't have the authority to do that. Domestic law, it's debatable, but I think the more we see of it, the more I feel like congressional authorization would be advisable.
And so the insight from that professor was really interesting because he said, while this might very well violate international law, because the U.S. remains the most powerful country on earth, there won't really be consequences there. It's more of a debate domestically because Congress typically is involved if any president authorizes military strikes like this, especially if lives end up being taken away during them. And the Trump administration has not really been interacting with Congress in this case, not only not getting their authorization, but also in certain scenarios not briefing them. So if these continue and if land strikes become something which, as you talked about, President Trump alluded to, this professor we spoke with said that Congress will likely intensify pressure to both be clued in and also be asked for authorization.
So now, I mean, Taylor, from what I understand, Venezuela is not one of the top countries that produces or smuggles drugs like cocaine or fentanyl into the United States. Has the administration produced any evidence that these boats are actually carrying narcotics?
So the only evidence we've gotten is those unclassified surveillance videos that you alluded to, where the president has literally been posting them on his Truth Social social media platform each time one of these strikes has taken place. And all we get is kind of what the visual offers. It says unclassified. You could see an above the camera shot of these boats sailing through the water, and then the moment of impact when a missile strikes them. And so the Trump administration has been essentially saying, trust us, we know that there were drugs on board and that the human beings on board were drug smugglers, but they've presented no other evidence either to the public or to Congress about it. Even on Friday afternoon, President Trump commented that the most recent strike, in his words, was against a submarine that he said he knew was being used for drug smuggling, but there was no evidence presented for it. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio said seconds prior that he wasn't prepared to talk about the details because allegedly there were survivors in that strike that the U.S. now has in custody.
The authorization for covert CIA action inside Venezuela is a major new development. We do know that recently the Trump administration has deployed a number of warships and naval forces near Venezuela. And for context, we should note that the Venezuelan president, Nicolás Maduro, is in fact widely considered to be corrupt. He's been accused of stealing the presidential election in his country last year. And during Trump's first term, Maduro was actually indicted in the U.S. on drug trafficking and corruption charges. Last week, during an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council, here is what Venezuela's ambassador to the UN had to say about all of that.
We believe that we are in dangerous times because all this escalation has nothing to do with the apparent excuse for its display. Is mainly directed against Venezuela and is threatening the Venezuelan territorial integrity. And we believe that we are in front of an imminent attack by the United States.
Yeah, I mean, it's the CIA, and so you'd think it would be secret, but Taylor, is the end goal here to just drive Maduro out of power?
So President Trump was asked this point blank earlier this week in the Oval Office, and he called it a ridiculous question about whether or not he was authorizing the CIA to take Maduro out, and then clarified that he wouldn't answer that publicly if that was the case. But the Trump administration has clearly been ramping up pressure on Maduro, and as you just heard from Maduro's associates, they're pushing back on what the U.S. is doing. What was really striking Friday afternoon, Errol, is that the president was asked toward the end of his meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky what he made of Maduro asking for kind of new mediations with the U.S. And President Trump said he's heard those mediations, and he said in his opinion Maduro was doing this because, and I'm quoting the president, he said Maduro does not want to F around with the United States. So this is becoming in many ways a war of words in addition to these military strikes and this political pressure.
Okay, in our last minute, Taylor, there's one last wrinkle. The Nobel Peace Prize was recently awarded to the leader of the opposition party in Venezuela. President Trump was not selected, although he keeps asking to be considered, but instead the actual winner, Maria Corina Machado, the lady who won, last week said that she wants to dedicate her win to Trump for supporting her cause. So now what is going on there? Is she the person who would take over if Maduro is deposed?
So she is the kind of the top opposition figure to the Maduro government, and she's currently in hiding and has remained in hiding since the elections last year that have faced these allegations of being rigged. But she's been speaking out publicly, especially since getting this Nobel Peace Prize. We know that she actually spoke with President Trump, and he spoke pretty glowingly about their conversation. And she has made a point in her public remarks, including in an interview on CNN recently, to say she feels President Trump deserves the Peace Prize for efforts he's been able to pursue in terms of the conflict between Israel and Hamas and other foreign conflicts. But she said she wants President Trump's help to go after Maduro, and that she feels that Maduro is waging war on his own country. So it'll be interesting to see how they interact moving forward, because she remains in hiding and Trump and Maduro are going back and forth. But it seems like that outreach from her left an impact on President Trump.
All right. Thank you very much. Thorough as usual, Taylor Popolars. We are not done just yet. When we come back, we'll highlight parts of President Trump's agenda that you might not have heard about. That includes the termination of humanitarian parole protection for hundreds of thousands of migrants. Stay with us.
The stories that touch our border affect us all. That's why at Spectrum News Plus, we don't just cover these communities. Our dedicated reporting team also calls them home. That perspective allows us to take an in-depth look, going beyond the politics, to see the impact on people's lives and what it means for you and your community. Balanced border coverage that tells the full story here on Spectrum News Plus. Available on all your favorite devices, exclusively on Spectrum.
It's only a game. It's only a little rivalry. It's only a ritual. When I come home and a few generations. You're always there. And only Spectrum TV includes all your favorite streaming apps with live TV at no extra cost. It's only a game. It's only everything.
I wouldn't do that. What are you doing? What are you looking for?
Mom was always organized, but she started forgetting to pay her bills on time.
And she'd buy the same gifts over and over.
Telling the girls about my Alzheimer's diagnosis was really hard.
At first we had our cries, but then we were like, okay, let's make a plan.
Early detection gave us time to adapt together.
It's so important for you to think about what you can do and making the most of what you have.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together.
Watching The Big Deal. President Donald Trump entered office in January, promising the mass deportation of millions of migrants who entered our country illegally. But his crackdown on non-citizens also includes expelling hundreds of thousands of people who entered legally through programs created by former President Biden to help foreign nationals fleeing unstable countries. Spectrum News political reporter Rena Diamante takes a closer look at the impact of revoking humanitarian parole in this report.
Why they wouldn't want their case closed and why they would want to fight their case.
Every week, Amanda Aguilar sets up shop in this parking lot in downtown San Antonio.
¿Cómo está?
It's a pop-up legal clinic.
La persona tiene representación o no.
Because it is next to the immigration courthouse, and Aguilar is an immigration attorney.
A lot of people are very uneducated on what they can do, what they can say, what legal arguments they can make against the closing of their case. So we just try to educate them better.
Aguilar says some immigrants facing the threat of deportation
Buenos días.
might not realize they're eligible for certain protections, even when all hope seems lost.
¿Cuál es tu nombre?
Yanquiel Blanco Lima.
One of Aguilar's clients is 35-year-old Yanquiel Blanco Lima of Cuba.
¿Puedes describir cómo era tu vida en Cuba?
Uno no tiene libertad de expresión, no puede hablar, no tiene derecho.
He says, one doesn't have freedom of expression. You can't speak, you don't have rights. There is a lot of need. Jobs don't pay enough for a person to live.
No hay corriente.
There is no money. It is a very, very bad country. Blanco talked to me from an Immigration and Customs Enforcement detention center in South Texas. I've been in the country for 2 years. I've never had a crime, never, not even a ticket. Blanco entered the U.S. in 2023 under a program President Joe Biden created that gave nationals of 4 unstable countries, Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, immigration parole to live and work in the U.S. for 2 years if they had a financial sponsor and passed a background check. By creating this legal pathway, President Biden hoped to end the chaotic surge of migrants crossing the southern border illegally. Once in the U.S., those granted protections would have time to explore other avenues toward legal status, such as asylum. By the end of 2024, more than 531,000 people from the 4 countries were paroled into the U.S. this way. As they say, it's the land of opportunity, and I always wanted to come here to work and make a life and to have rights. President Donald Trump entered office in January, vowing mass deportations of undocumented immigrants. But he also suspended the parole program, saying it was abused, undercut American workers, and opened the door to crime. In March, his administration took away the work authorization granted to the parolees and said their right to remain in the U.S. would end in 30 days. In May, Blanco went looking for carpentry work with a friend when immigration enforcement officers arrested them. He said it was unclear to him how the end of the program would affect his protections as an immigrant. Blanco has been in detention ever since, trying to fight his deportation. He says it's better than the alternative.
Yo tengo mucho miedo de regresar a ese país, no.
I am very afraid to return to that country. Something might happen to me. They might want to imprison me. They might want to harm me. And here I will resist until, I don't know, some judge has compassion for me and gives me the opportunity again to continue in this country.
¿Y ustedes de dónde son?
Aguilar says Blanco has followed the law every step of the way, but was still arrested. She said it shows how the fortunes of immigrants can flip in an instant when immigration policy changes from one administration to the next. The lawyer is trying to see now if Blanco qualifies for protection under a 1966 law helping Cubans fleeing their country.
He was allowed to come into the United States. He entered at an airport. He was subject to vetting before he entered. And now, because of the new law changes, his path has changed, but that does not change the fact that he did enter lawfully.
Immigrants in the U.S. playing by the rules, but suddenly at risk when the rules change. Rena Diamante, Spectrum News.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Big Deal. We'll see you next week. Stay tuned to your local station.
Friday nights, The Big Deal with Errol Lewis, where Spectrum News' local political journalists break down the most important issues shaping our nation.
Here's the deal. People need a place to explore national issues that have an impact on their community. To understand those issues better, we're bringing together our team of local political journalists from across the country to break down what's happening. So join us every week to catch up on the key stories making a big difference across the nation and in your local community.
Watch The Big Deal with Errol Lewis Friday nights at 9 Eastern, 8 Central on Spectrum News Plus. Available on all of your favorite devices, exclusively on Spectrum.
There's an international travel plan with Spectrum that was an additional $10 a month as opposed to paying a ridiculous amount per day for roaming fees. This
literally felt like my old phone carrier was reaching their hand into my wallet and just helping themselves to some of my cash. I like having no surprises when it comes to my cell phone bill, and with Spectrum, that's been the case. So it's saved me a ton of money.
Real customers, real savings. To see how much you can save, visit spectrum.com/save.
Weather can be beautiful, inconvenient, and at times powerful. And it affects everything we do. At Spectrum News Plus, our weather experts update you with the information and the context you need so you can better plan your day. And we do it every 10 minutes. We're the calm in the storm. Weather on the Ones on Spectrum News Plus, exclusively on Spectrum. And get your weather anytime on the Spectrum News app. Spectrum News Plus. Local stories, connecting communities.